to many of Irish football's greatest moments and a few difficult nights in between. The less said about those, the better. It's the Yves Stadium on the site of the old Lansdowne Road, home to Irish football for many years now, but that hasn't always been the case. In a bygone era, home was here at Dalymount Park, which is of course where Bohemians Football Club reside. But if we're looking for where the Irish men's senior team kicked off for the very first time in the nation's history, we'll have to go a little bit further afield and also back 100 years. Alright, I think we're back in colour. That was going to get a little bit annoying. Anyway, as you probably saw on the map, we're in Paris, and not just any old part of Paris. We're in a northwestern suburb called Colombes, and I'm standing outside the Stade Yves du Manoir, which is hosting the Olympic hockey tournament where the Irish men's hockey team are going to be in action over the next couple of weeks. But 100 years ago, this is where the Republic of Ireland men's national team played their first official match. Retrospectively speaking, I say retrospectively for a reason. 100 years ago, the Olympic football tournament, this was one of the venues for it, and a team that was then known as the Football Association of Ireland, Free State, the FAI-FS, kicked off here for the first time. This followed the FAI and IFA split, but I said retrospectively for a reason, because for many years the game that was played here and in another venue that we'll hopefully get to, the Stade Bauer, these games were not fully recognised as full senior internationals, but that changed this year, and this is where the 1924 Centenary Committee come in, and they're made up of journalists Paul Lennon and Ty Gerry, also the now MEP Aodhán Reardon, and also a couple of people you're going to meet along the way, which is Gerry Farrelly and Gary Spain. So they conducted research about the players that were involved here and the games that were played here, and they got the ball rolling in terms of getting these games reclassified and putting forward a proposal to the FAI.
Right up until the 1960s, these were recognised as our first internationals, and FIFA subsequently downgraded the 1924 Olympics. But in 1999, they looked at this again and they decided it was up to the nations themselves. And it's great the FAI board have actually decided that they can again be classed as senior internationals.
I do a little bit of writing for the FAI match programmes, and it's something that in research I was doing, it always kind of struck me that we had originally recognised the 24 Olympic matches and the couple of friendlies afterwards as full internationals, and then that changed in the 1960s, and a lot of other countries post 1999, when FIFA said you could reclassify those results, have reclassified them as full internationals. We hadn't, and it was myself and Aodhán Reardon were looking at a bit of research for kind of a podcast project we were doing, and we both said, well, like, why is this the case when, say, Uruguay or the USA or other teams we played count them as full internationals? So I suppose we approached the FAI, and there was other members of the committee involved who kind of did the research into this and looked at the historical background. So Paul Lennon, Gary Spain, Ty Gerry as well. Ty was especially important from, say, the Athlone town players' point of view, because Athlone had 5 players in that squad that went to the Olympics. Ty has written an excellent book on Athlone Town from that era. About, they were the FAI Cup champions in 1924, the year we went to the Olympics. So we were able to track down relatives of all the players and the trainer Charlie Harris, who were involved in those squads, the Olympic Games squads and the games from Estonia and here in Dalymount against the USA. And in fairness to the FAI, they've agreed to reclassify those results. So we're now celebrating a centenary since our first senior internationals, which were at the Olympic Games in Paris, and it's a nice circularity that we're back this summer with having Olympic Games in Paris. And if you think about it, like, that was a FIFA organised tournament. It was the biggest football tournament in terms of nation participation up until the 1982 World Cup, which is mad when you think about it. There was 22 nations competed in that. Uruguay were deserved winners, and Ireland got to a quarterfinal. So we've only, as you know, we've only done that once in a major international championship since. So I think it's an amazing achievement, and it's only right and proper to recognise those players and the people involved in that achievement.
So the FAI got on board and they approved the proposal put forward to them by the 1924 Centenary Committee, which means that the game that was played here against Bulgaria, the game played against the Netherlands at the same Olympic football tournament at another venue called the Stade Bauer, and 2 friendlies against Estonia and the United States are formally added to the Republic of Ireland men's national team's overall record, and that was confirmed in May. And that same month I popped along to the Castleknock Hotel where descendants of the players that were involved in 1924 gathered along with members at the Centenary Committee. And then a week later, when the Republic of Ireland were playing Hungary in a friendly at the Viva Stadium, they were given pride of place on the pitch. But who were their ancestors? Who were the players from 1920?
I mean, we've just come out of our national decade of centenaries, where we were looking at kind of 1923 going back to 1913, with the lockout in 1913 through to 1923 and the Dumps Arm Order and the end of the Civil War. Now, many historians would argue you could keep going. We had an army mutiny in March of 1924 involving actually a former footballer as well. But if you think about the context where those players, the time they're growing up in, the upheaval, say someone like Dinny Hannon who captains us against Bulgaria and the Netherlands in the Olympics. I mean, he started off making his debut for Ireland before partition in 1908.
I'm a grandnephew of the captain of the 1924 team, Dinny Hannon. Grew up in a huge football family and I knew everything about him from day one. Dinny Hannon lived to a great age, so I was able to interact with him even though I was only 15. He bought me my first football jerseys and used to tell me all the stories about his great past.
Hannon is a fascinating character, and I had said before, I think you can almost tell the story of early Irish football through Hannon. I mean, he's born 8 years after the founding of the IFA. He makes his debut. He's from Athlone as well. He has great success at both Bohemians and Athlone. He wins an Irish Cup with Bows in 1908. By that stage, he's already an Irish international. He scores on his debut as a 20-year-old against England. And he continues on playing for Bohemians through the teens and into the early 20s. Goes back home to Athlone Town as part of that team that wins the FAI Cup.
He scored the winner in 1924, the same year as the 24 Olympics, at the veteran age of 36 years of age against Fortunes of Cork. And his picture hangs in the Players' Lounge in Dalymount Park.
He's the oldest player on our team and probably one of the oldest footballers in the competition. He misses, depending on which reports you read, he definitely misses a penalty against Bulgaria, and some reports actually say he misses 3, although I'm not sure if some of them were maybe free kicks and things like that. He hits a bar and the Bulgarian goalkeeper has an inspired game, but he's our first captain. It's important to remember that. And he later becomes kind of a fixture in Athlone as well. He runs a pub which is kind of the footballing pub of the town. It's later run by Peter Malloy, his nephew, who's also an excellent footballer in the League of Ireland, but also a great GA player as well.
There were 16 players travelled with Charlie Harris of Bohemians as the trainer. So Bohemians were the champions that year, and they actually supplied 5 members of the squad. Athlone Town won the FAI Cup. So far for their men's team, the first and only time. It's a centenary of that as well. They also provided 5 members of the squad. St James's Gate were a huge powerhouse in the game. I appreciate they're still going, thankfully, in the Leinster League. But they won the first league and cup of the new Irish Free State. And they also provided 5 members of the squad.
The other player is Joe Kendrick, who plays for a team called Brooklyn, who are nothing to do with New York. It's named after a now long gone road called Brooklyn Avenue, which is off the South Circular Road. But James's Gate, I suppose, they're double winners in the first League of Ireland season. 1924 Bows are League of Ireland champions, and as I said, Athlone Town are 1924 FAI Cup winners. And of course, the big challenge as well is any of the handful of players who are playing professional in England, well, one, they wouldn't be eligible because the Olympics was strictly amateur only. But even if they were, hadn't been the case, it was very, very difficult to get British clubs to release players, and that would continue to be a kind of trademark of Irish football for decades to come. So I suppose these were among the strongest players in the leagues, from the cup winners, the league winners, and the Gate being one of the kind of stronger sides as well. Several of the players involved had very interesting histories, whether they had been World War I veterans or had been involved in the War of Independence and Civil War and things like that. So again, a very, very complex and diverse history. And these players, many of whom were only in like their 20s, or Hannon was the oldest, he was 36, had lived extraordinary lives, even while they were still relatively young men. They'd lived through such upheaval, both political and sporting. So they had to go through an awful lot, and they weren't really supported. I think it's an important thing to say is that here in Dalymount they had to play a charity match against Glasgow Celtic to fundraise. Some of the players had to dip into their own meagre savings to make sure that they could actually go to Paris. They had the option of actually staying a bit later to see the final, but they didn't have enough money. They had to come home. So it just it shows how far they had come, that they took a big risk even going to the Olympics, going to Paris. And look, it also shows, I think, that we did take risks as a football association. They took risks as players, as administrators, as coaches, but it paid off.
It was a 22-team tournament, but Ireland got a bye in the first round, so they were in the round of 16, drawn against Bulgaria on the 28th of May 1924. And it turned out to be a great win for the boys in blue, actually, because Bulgaria were wearing green. We actually wore blue for that tournament. And we won the game with a goal 15 minutes from time. Johnny Murray's cross was fired home by Paddy Duncan.
Duncan is our first goal scorer, as you mentioned, a very versatile player. He plays for St James's Gate, so he effectively plays as a centre forward in this game, but he's actually more used to playing as kind of a defensive midfielder for St James's Gate, but he's incredibly versatile. He has a very long career. He kind of joins James's Gate as a kind of 18-year-old, and he's still kind of playing for them, even though he's had a couple of bad injuries into his late 30s. So he has effectively a 20-year top-flight career. And he's an important guy for us because he scores that goal, but also he has a nickname, Dirty Duncan, so we might think he's a bit of a tough player on the pitch as well. And he's probably unlucky not to win further caps. Back in the days we didn't really have squad announcements. He picked a team and maybe had one or two reserves, and he was kind of 12th man for Ireland a few times. So probably unlucky not to add to his 3 caps. But a very important player for St James's Gate and for Ireland.
It's the handsome guy just there. Okay. Paddy Dirty Duncan, as he was known, now officially the first goal scorer for Ireland, of which we're extremely proud. I'm the grandson of Paddy Duncan. It would have been my own father who, over the years, would have told us that he scored the first goal for Ireland. But I'm not going to say we poop-had it, but it was hard to believe. So when this all kicked off a couple of months ago, I started doing my own personal research on Paddy Duncan because it was coming up to the anniversary, and I came across an article about the squad, and I got in touch with Aon O'Riordan, and it just took off from there.
And I've got to take off from here because the next match the Republic of Ireland played at the 1924 Olympic football tournament did not take place here at the Stade Yves de Manoir. It was over at the Stade Bauer, and that is closer to the Stade de France. So while I make my way there, let's find out what the Irish players got up to between the matches while they were in Paris all of 100 years ago.
On June 4th, 1924, just before returning home, there was a gala dinner for the Irish team, and the Irish team dined with Jules Rimet. So Jules Rimet actually organised the tournament. He was the president of FIFA at the time. His club were Red Star of Paris. And Jules Rimet, who subsequently organised the first World Cup, and the first World Cup trophy was subsequently named in his honour. So he dined with the Irish team on the evening of June 4th, 1924.
So 2 days before dining with Jules Rimet, the Republic of Ireland team played their second match here, an Olympic quarter-final against the Netherlands, and this is where the journey ends, spoiler alert.
The win over Bulgaria qualified us for a quarter-final against the Dutch on June 2nd, 1924, in what's now the Stade de Bauer, actually home of Red Star Paris, Jules Rimet's club. And in the end, we went down by 2-1. The Dutch took an early lead, and just before half-time, Johnny Murray set up Frank Gent of Athlone for the equaliser.
Frank Gent has a very enviable 2 appearances, 2 goals ratio. He comes in as a left-sided midfielder in place of Joe Kendrick, who's injured in that first game. The game against Bulgaria is played on a very hot day, a very dry pitch, and Kendrick picks up an injury. Gent comes in and scores against the Dutch, and he also scores in the following game against Estonia. So that's a very admirable ratio, as they say, and he's one of the players for that Athlone town team that have won the FAI Cup just a couple of months earlier.
It was a bit of a backs-to-the-wall performance in the second half. We were hanging on, but we did hang on for the 90 minutes. Went into extra time, and contemporary reports actually say we started to dominate the game. And it was the Dutch on the back foot, but they scored a breakaway goal just before half-time and extra time, and they held on for the win. And Dinny Hannon, actually, the Irish captain from Athlone, he actually said afterwards, at this stage he was 36 and near the end of his career, he actually said he'd never seen a more disappointed bunch of players as the Irish side that lost that day.
Now, while the journey for the Irish team at that Olympic football tournament in 1924 may have ended here, they did experience a number of firsts before all the other athletes from other sports that represented Ireland in that maiden Olympics post-independence.
It was the first time the tricolour was flown at a sporting event abroad. It's hugely significant because in 1923 the FAI was just admitted to FIFA, and so these were actually the first internationals we ever played, and these players were also our first Olympians, because as you say, the Olympics it was the first time Ireland had competed as Ireland in the Olympics. Our athletes previously competed for Britain or the USA, and because the football tournament was held a few weeks before the main games, these footballers became our first Olympians, so our first internationals and our first Olympians, and also the first Irish footballers to play in a major tournament.
I think a lot of football fans maybe seem to think that Irish football history begins with Jack Charlton in 1986 or something like that, and look, that's certainly not the case. And there were heroes from the past, and Irish football, I think, has had to go through so many bumps along the way, so many roadblocks, and it was so difficult. Even forming the FAI, convulsions of the state when it is formed, how difficult it is, the antagonistic relationship it has with the British associations, how difficult it is to get representation and recognition from FIFA. And then, as you say, look, the 1924 Olympics and the 28 ones were effectively and are regarded as FIFA's World Championships. They're created by FIFA. I mean, the Irish team have dinner with Jules Rimet, who has a famous trophy named after him. So these were the real deal World Championships, and I think those players should be recognised, and they did it through amazing adversity, really.
So thanks to Gerry Farrell there, and also to Gary Spain for their insights into the 1924 Irish Olympic football team that were very much pioneers, not just in terms of Irish football, but also in terms of Irish sport, and also Ireland at the Olympics now. There's an Olympics ongoing now in 2024, so there's a nice symmetry that we're returning here once again with one of the biggest selections of Irish teams ever, 133 athletes. So I've got to bid you farewell, as locals say, and also as David Leary once said to Robert Pires during a particularly tempestuous Leeds versus Arsenal match many moons ago, au revoir.